Life, it comes at us like a train with all its ups and downs, its pains and its joys. How do we deal with it? How do we process it? How how do what we learn from life and especially what we teach life back in return makes all of the difference. Welcome to Life Talks. Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Life Talks. I really hope that you have been enjoying the series on allies that we've been airing thus far. As you can tell, I have invited individuals who I highly admire and respect, and not just because they are an ally, but it's because I've gotten to know them personally and I have seen the heart. I am so excited today because not only do I have another one of these individuals, but she's also a very, very close friend of mine. I call her my sister, and I have known her quite some time. I was surprised that she said yes, although I think I knew she would have. But I can't wait to introduce you for those of you who do not know her. I just can't wait for you to see this incredible woman. So I'm going to introduce you to Mrs. Beth Kallman Werner, founder and president of Author Connections. Today's authors have loads of questions about getting their books noticed with effective promotion. Entertainment technology and the publishing industry are evolving daily. Not all authors have the time or experience to plan and execute an integrated marketing program. In fact, many authors don't want to focus at all on the business aspects of publishing. They'd rather focus on the next book. Is that you? And this is from her website. Author Connections can help. Beth Werner has been a professional editor and marketer for more than 20 years. As a former director of marketing and sales at Kirkus, Beth worked on book marketing and special media projects with clients such as Random House, Penguin, Hachette, Macmillan, Disney, Hyperion, Chronicle, Scholastic, FSG, Wiley, and many others. She has also counseled countless indie authors on how to successfully bring new titles to market. Whether your book is just getting started or has already been published, together we, Beth and Author Connections, will build a comprehensive integrated marketing plan that meets 4 key hallmarks of successful promotion: simple, concise, informative, and entertaining. I want to introduce the world to the queen, Beth Kallman Werner. Hi, Beth.
Hello. Thank you for
Welcome to the
thank you,
show.
and thank you for that introduction. It sounds good when you read
It sounds good reading it. I'm so honored for you to for us to chat again. You know, we have these intense conversations, and we talk about some crazy things at times, but they're always transformative. And you're just so wise and so brilliant, and you have such a loving heart and mind that every time we speak, I have to go jot things afterwards because I learned so much. And of course, we snooze on each other and, splurge the love. But I do have to say that you are one of the women in my circle that I highly, highly respect. And I really depend on at times for wisdom. And so this is part of why I'm so honored. And we promised we weren't going to cry, right? Okay.
I promised myself I would not be emotional, but just everything that you just said is 100% mutual. We have known each other for years, and I've watched you go through. We've both been through ups and downs and highs and lows, and you inspire me.
Oh,
So,
well,
anyways,
I love you.
same.
So we met through For Real Women International and Norca Blackman Richards, who is the CEO and founder of this incredible, yes, this
Norca is all
incredible,
over the place.
organization that serves women globally, and you have been a partner, a sister, a supporter um, for as far as I remember. And I'm so grateful to be a part of this organization, to be part of the change that it enacts in the lives of women, and then we get to see you, and you have been an ally for us. So this is not something that's new. Um, Now, when I asked you to talk about this specific topic, it was in the realm of the racial injustices and this upheaval that we are experiencing here in America. We both live here, and when I thought about the show, I thought about you as one of the first people, just because of the conversations we've had about us as women, and you being white, and me being black, and all of those conversations that we've had about sisterhood. And so when I thought about a female, I thought about you. And when we spoke, you're always so frank. You'll say, "Girl, you sure you want me?" Because I'll say it like it is. And, I don't want to offend. And, I really appreciated that. But this is what we want. We want honest conversation. And even if it's tough, we need to have it. And so again, I say to you that we will talk with our hearts. And as long as we do that, we're going to be fine.
I agree.
And
although it is hard to not get emotional, because it is,
yes,
it is so sensitive,
yes,
and so upsetting. Very difficult times.
yes.
Very difficult.
Now, your heritage, Jewish heritage?
Jewish. My grandparents came from the Ukraine, a town called Minsk, sort of border Russia, Ukraine. And Jewish, essentially escaped. They got out of Russia because of the terrible mistreatment there. Jewish people are no strangers to persecution and oppression and slavery and all kinds of injustice and mistreatment. So there are certain parallels there, I'm sure, that are, too obvious to bother going into. Thankfully, in my lifetime, although I have experienced moments here and there, I haven't really felt held back by anything. And of course, I'm very grateful for that. But yeah, my grandparents came. They had absolutely nothing. They came on the ships in the early 1900s. My grandfather, my mom's dad, got pink eye on the ship, and he was held back. I don't even think it was Ellis Island. I think it was Governor's Island, where they had quarantine. Now we all know the word quarantine. He wasn't allowed in until they were cleared of all the diseases that they caught on the trip over. And then they came and they made their way. I think my grandfather hauled laundry in the tenements up and down the stairs, 4 flights stairs of tenements. That's what my grandfather did. And in those days, my grandma, they had 8 kids.
Wow.
And no money. My mother was the 7th of 8. And she remembers them moving when they couldn't pay the rent anymore. They would move with 8 kids.
Wow. Every time.
And they moved close. It was all the same area because they had family. When the first generation came, they kind of moved they came to where family was, at least in our family. So, someone came over first, and then other people came in, and you kind of set up where there were people nearby who could be a support system. And then just really working class. That's one of the conversations that we've had. At least for me personally, because I grew up in New York City and I went to public school in Brooklyn, and I was one of the poorest people on my street growing up. Race was never so much an issue for me. I always felt like it was more of a socioeconomic, the class issues were much more of a factor. And I believe still today are much more of a factor, if not for all the ignorance that surrounds everything and turns to fear, which turns to anger, which turns to violence, these progressive steps that get us into so much trouble. I could go on about this all day long. We should stick to your...
Well, no, because our stories matter. and they do lend into how we understand each other. So
Yes.
you mentioned Brooklyn. You're a New York girl. We hear the
Yeah.
accent.
My core. It's in my core.
So since you mentioned the class division and experience in living in that realm, do you remember at any time where you felt marginalized? Where were you bullied? Were you aware of? I had another guest where he mentioned he knew when he went into the store that uh, he was different, and there was embarrassment and shame because he had food stamps.
Hmm.
Everybody had, he said, the different colors, and within those classes, um, that was very real to him. So he was
Hmm.
able to empathize in some areas with the lack of and the looks. So did you experience anything like that growing up?
I think for me, I don't know if I was ever so much conscious of what other people thought, but I was very conscious of the way my mother was treated.
Mm.
So it wasn't that I was embarrassed thinking what other people thought, it was more what I felt. I picked up on what she was going through. If she was in distress, if she felt mistreated, so I don't know. If I think of the most particular instance, and this wasn't about any kind of prejudice so much as just, again, this class sort of when I realized that my family wasn't like other families, um, we went shop. My dad had been out of work for some time, and my mother went on welfare. She had 3 kids to feed, and it wasn't for long. I was young, so I don't know the exact details, but I think it was less than a year. Um, but his unemployment had run out, and he didn't have a job yet, and she needed to feed her family.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a whole other layer of issues because their marriage wasn't the greatest, and my father had his disappointments in his life, and he wasn't always nice. So there was a whole, like I said, I picked up on my mother's distress.
Right.
And so her stress wasn't only the financial concerns and caring for her 3 kids and running a household, but dealing with this man who was not happy and angry and whatever. So anyway, I went shopping with her, grocery shopping. The example you gave of this friend with the food stamps is what made me think of it. And I don't remember if we had stamps. I don't know if that was the case, but I remember we walked into the market, and I was the youngest, so I was the one with my mom. My brother and sister are older, and she had $10. That was what she had for a week to feed a family of 5. And we walked into, and I didn't know what that meant, but we walked into the store, and she stood like at the open aisle or whatever for a few minutes. And then she took my hand and we walked back out. And I said, Mom, where are we going? We didn't shop yet. And she said, I don't know what to do right now. I need a few minutes. And she had to just sit. We sat on the curb outside the store, and she cried. So as a kid, that had a profound impact on me. And I know that my brother went through many years of seeing my parents struggle with money and not having, and bills and debt and credit cards. And so he ended up very, very driven, ended up extremely successful financially. And but we just lost him in November, and worked to his dying day. So we have to choose very carefully. I know I'm sort of going in all these
No,
tangents.
you're fine. You're fine.
We have to choose very carefully what we spend our time on and what we decide is most important. When it comes to these race relations, it sounds so silly, but for me, just follow the 10 Commandments. Just follow the 10 Commandments. This is very basic stuff. Very basic stuff. You don't want to play with somebody. You don't want to do this with somebody. Okay, fine. But what's with the anger and the so much mistreatment, so many years of unfair mistreatment? And then of course the anger, the resentment grows, the frustration grows, the rage grows. So when you have no opportunity, when you have no voice, when no one's listening, when you try every possible way and no one's paying attention. Or even when people pretend to pay attention, nothing changes. It's just placating. What does that lead you to? What does that lead any person,
Anyone.
animal, living thing? You're backed in a corner. What do? You have to feed your family. What do?
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm skipping all over because I just have so many thoughts. I think to maintain a level of rage and disappointment and hurt in 2020, despite the heinous things that still do clearly go on, I don't think that's the whole story. And while I believe that in a moment where something is getting attention and finally a door is cracked open, you have to try to open that door, blast it open. I get all of that. But at the same time, I don't think it's fair to set us back 150 years either, because a lot of progress has been made. A lot of people, I know many, many people of color who are extremely successful and very educated, who raise whole families with school and church and family and friends and cousins and get-togethers and reunions and vacations and nice cars and nice clothes, and you know what I mean? This is not the same situation today that it was. And that doesn't mean we don't still need tremendous progress. Just like women need tremendous progress, just like disabled need tremendous progress. We could keep segmenting our society into every group that's been marginalized. But what I hope so much for is that all of this unrest, all of the struggle and effort and energy that goes into trying to foster the changes that we need, I hope that the goal is peace.
Yeah. So let me ask you a question. And again, we're just gonna have the conversation. So for me as an immigrant, right? As an immigrant, I have lived in certain places. So in Connecticut, where I spent the bulk of my teenage years, and I have had friends who, like all of us, had financial disparities, growing up poor and so forth, and have done well for themselves. Um, we've also seen some of their families still live in the same place and experiencing the same struggles for various reasons, whether it's education. The child can get educated and move on. But if the parent never was able to get an education or whatever the case may be, you would find that there are levels or gradients of success stories. But within the same community, it will be a success story. But when you go down the line to a generation before that, they're still oppressed, per se. So I think in looking at it like that, it's always like you will see that if you look close enough, if we look close enough in some of these areas where may not be receiving funding, the education system is crap. Those areas are known for poverty and all that stuff. There's still places that still look the same 5 years as if 5 years ago. And in some of these communities, you'll hear success stories of the one who broke away, the one person who
and not always
got a scholarship.
Sometimes facing a lot of resentment from the very people
who
want what they have, who want the same thing. Yeah.
And you may find some who never go back to pour back into their communities. They will get their education and leave. And it's not not the blaming, but that's the reality of the picture that we see today in our communities.
Right.
You know, when I was researching for some of my other shows, it was it was really it was really weird seeing the narratives that had not changed over the last 200 years
Mm.
in some situations. The only things that changed were the dates, the places, and the people, because they were dead. So I had to transition myself from where I was
Mm-hmm.
into those shoes and those stories, to help understand a little bit of probably why some of the pain is still raw,
Yes.
and why some
And there were
African
told
Americans
the
will
language.
say things haven't changed.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say, "What do you mean?" And but peeling back those curtains, you're saying, "Oh my gosh, this stuff still happens in America." It absolutely does. So you are right. We are segmented, and we shouldn't be, but we are.
Right.
And this country is almost like different countries in one. You
Mm-hmm.
would drive down south in certain towns and think that you have portaled back into
Even within one state, you
1940.
can
Right,
have completely, yeah,
right.
absolutely.
So it's a fine line that we keep jumping, because if we remove ourselves too long, we don't see it. But if we stay too long, it's so frustrating, and it's just it wears on the heart. And so it's trying to find that balance where we still fight for it and yet try to progress. You
Yeah.
know, as you're talking. Um, so there have been a lot of discussion on social media, which social media really is not the the litmus test for anything viable, I should say. But there has been raw conversations on social media, especially after George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery and all the countless of other deaths. Sandra
Mm-hmm.
Bland, um, her killers have yet to be held accountable.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't make sense. Yet we keep on living. And so within the Black community, there was the cry of non-Blacks. So you're not saying anything. Where are my white friends who love me so much? And da da da. And then you had white who said things and then were blasted for it. So it was like, damned if you do, damned if you don't. That's how they
Mm-hmm.
felt. Then there were others who said, I'm trying to listen. I want to sit in a space to listen and learn.
Right.
Then there were others who said, quite frankly, I don't know what to say. And it's not about the damned if you do, damned if you don't. They just really did not know what to say because they were trying to process themselves what they were seeing. I have had friends of mine who said, I didn't watch the video at first, but then I watched it and it blew my mind because if I had not watched it, it would not have transformed my thinking because it was hearsay at that point. Did you hear what they did to him? And
Right.
that changed their heart, as far as with why is this happening in America to them,
Mm-hmm.
um, on social media. But then us blacks are saying this has been happening for hundreds of years and still happening now. And only because of technology, um, or someone having their phone, it is
Is
now
it that bad
broadcasted.
representation? Yeah. Yeah.
And if it wasn't, you have hundreds and hundreds of minorities, including the indigenous people and Latinos who die every day and no one knows about it and they never get their justice. So I say all of that to lead into this. What made the difference for you? Because you did share on your social media a post and you said, I wasn't going to say anything, but I did say something. And to
Mm-hmm.
me, it didn't matter that you said it on social media because we have a relationship and we have talked countless of times.
Yeah.
So I know where you stand.
Mm-hmm.
But you felt that you needed to say something. So twofold questions. What brought you to that point? And did anything change within your circle after you shared your thoughts on
I
our
can actually tell you what led me to that point was Teresa's video. Teresa's video on the 4RWI page about um, it doesn't matter if we know where we stand. It's not enough to just be okay with who we are and how we run our own lives. It's time to sort of nudge the neighbor. make sure that everybody's stepping up to do the right thing, which is a stretch for me, honestly, because I'm a big believer in personal accountability. And although I'm happy to help someone close to me if they need me, I try to do what I can for people I care about. I don't tend to be someone who is always looking at the next person. I don't look at them to judge them. I don't look at them to help me. And frankly, I don't look to help them. I kind of live in my own little world. I do my thing. I try to do what I can for the people in my circle. So I was not feeling compelled to speak out. I did feel like I have many friends, not a few, many friends who are of, colored, black, brown, whatever, Asian, people of all races from all parts of the world. There are no limits in my social circle. And so I didn't feel so personally affected. And at the same time, Teresa's video was sort of a reminder we are all personally affected. And it actually reminded me of something in the Passover Seder. And I'm not an observant Jew, just for the record. I'm a terrible Jewish person because I would never give up lobster in a million years, and it isn't kosher. But there is a portion of the Passover Seder, part of the ceremony, that is for when the Jews were enslaved for 400 years in Egypt, and God was letting them out. And the story goes that God put these 10 plagues upon the Egyptians so that Moses could lead his people to freedom. The Jews wanted to always remember what the Egyptians suffered, even though the Egyptians were the oppressors. The Jewish mentality was, now they are suffering. And in our freedom, we will never forget what other people had to sacrifice for us to be free, even if it was the people who were bad to us. So there's a portion of the service where you spill a drop of wine for each of the 10 plagues. And when you read it in the prayer book, or the Haggadah it's called, when you read it, it says, because none of us are truly free until we are all free. So that's where I see a synergy here. Different faith, different custom, different traditions, but the same concept. If we are all part of this human race, then the reason you have to step up, and this is to answer your question, the reason I finally felt compelled to say something was because when something like this happens, it is happening to all of us. And who's to say that this person wouldn't be someone I know next week? And it is very difficult, and it is very complicated because it isn't one-sided. That is situation, the George Floyd situation, absolutely was. The young woman who was the EMT in her home, hands down, no question. These are instances where I just don't see how there's any. It is what it is. It's in plain sight. The investigations were conducted, do what needs to be done. And I think that so much of the anger and the resentment comes from a total lack of trust. And the lack of trust comes from not doing the right thing. And in some cases, that is both sides. That is both sides. And to go back to the way you started the interview about our stories, human nature is that we are influenced by our experience. If people have had a bad experience with police, that's their impression of a police officer. Right. So it doesn't matter. I mean, it does matter. It should matter. But like you said, it doesn't matter what we want or what should be. We have to deal with what is. The reality is that if you have a kind police officer coming towards you to help, but your only experience with police officers has been terrible, you're not going to trust that police officer. Yeah. And same thing, a police officer showing up to a situation where he's coming into a community that he's an outsider and he already knows these people don't like him, they don't want him, they don't trust him. And it's his job. He has to be there to help. What's he supposed to do? It's terrible. It's terrible. And I know so many people on both sides. Yeah. Good people. Yeah. Terribly unfair what's happening to the cops. Terribly unfair what's happening to these young men. And the cops have the advantage. They have the uniform. They have the legitimate weapon. they have the law on their side. So there's no getting around that. So I don't want to make it seem like these are equal playing fields.
Right.
That's the problem. They're not. And I've even said this to friends of mine who are police officers and people who are in corrections, that I understand the code of blue. I do. When you have a job like that, it's not quite, but it's almost like the military. You have to trust the guy next to you more than anyone else in your life, right? But, and I believe this so strongly, I don't care what precinct it is. I don't care what town, in what state, in what country, on what continent. If you are the member of police force within your precinct, the 4 or 5, maybe 2, maybe 12, who are racist within that precinct, everybody knows who those guys are.
That's right.
Just like in the neighborhoods.
Yeah. We know who the drug dealers are. We know, yeah.
Everybody knows.
Yeah.
So in these communities, having these difficult conversations, it has to be, I think before we could even hope to bring 2 sides to a table, each side
has to deal with their inner.
Figure out internally, what is our goal here? What is our goal? If the cops want to protect each other and they want to feel safe going into communities because they are on a mission to help, they're on a mission to serve, they're public officers, they're public servants, our taxes pay them. They have to be willing to weed out. They have to be willing to screen better. They have to be willing to change the criteria for recruitment.
And training. Do you not
Training all day long, training.
Yeah.
All day long. And that training has to include the people from the other communities.
Yeah.
There have to be these focus groups, having these difficult conversations before it's responding to something that happens in the street. It has to happen early on. And I'm not in a think tank, and I am not a leader that deals with these issues, but I'm not a stupid person.
Right.
And anyone with common sense knows we have psychiatrists and psychologists and people who are in societal, civilization, anthropological think tanks about blending cultures, about mixing groups. There are ways to do this.
Right.
There are ways to design a questionnaire and a work application. There are ways to present role playing in training exercises so that you can tell this person is not responding correctly. We need to work on that before it's something that's escalating in real life.
Right.
And the only explanation for that never having happened before is they really didn't want to, or the people who wanted to were the smaller number and they didn't speak up loudly enough. Mm-hmm. So now the noise is being made. So now let's see with the noise.
Well, you know that even again in my research and I'm trying to go back to the root of it. And, I'm so grateful now for this criminal justice degree, because I get to go back and figure out how to trace back where certain things have their origin. Mm. And one of the difficult things I have realized is it's not hard for me to say because you cannot deny facts, right? You cannot argue with facts or truth. But it's been really difficult for my community of non-Black friends to see the truth of the origin of policing and to recognize that from slavery days, where the policing was instituted to protect white property, mm-hmm. slaves, and the white man's physical property and slaves. Mm-hmm. And over the years, history has shown us that it has just been reshaped as periods come in to be named something else. And part of why I say that is that when we recognize these things, even within ourselves, sometimes it really needs to be taken down to the root and reimagined what it should be today. What is it supposed to be today? If things do, you talk about generational curses, mm-hmm. things do travel down systemically. Yeah, and I would say that because I have family who are cops too, right? Um, a few good ones come. It's like a barrel of apples. You put a few good ones in there. If there's already worms and all of that that was there from the beginning, eventually it will come up to the top, no matter how many good ones are there, because coming in now does not unroot years of what this thing is supposed to be instituted for. So in the training, I feel that it's too short. I feel that training for a police academy, I know in other countries it's like 9 months to a year, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some of them 2 years
Right.
before you get to go into civilian
Active
territory.
situations. Right, right.
And especially now, if we see how our world is with trauma, which is what you
Mm-hmm.
talked about earlier today, we're traumatized. We are traumatized.
Yes.
So within this policing, being trauma informed, I think it's a key to being a, a good responsive police officer also. Knowing the triggers, your triggers too, and the community triggers, the community that you serve in. If I'm a black woman and I'm a cop and I'm put to serve in a white community, I have to know. I
Right.
have to know the history. I have to know the triggers. I
Mm-hmm.
have to know what me as a female is does to a male when I walk in.
And
You
what's going
understand?
to diffuse the
What's
situation?
happened exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
so I believe it's missing. Those components are missing. And I had shared with another individual I interviewed, I said even some social work aspects need to be part of
Very much so.
training.
Social work. Very
Exactly.
much so. Because I think, and again, I'm not, this may not be something people want to hear, but when it comes to oppression, like you said, there are generational things that trickle down.
Mhm.
And so I've seen it in friends, families, and neighborhoods, families that when people feel very oppressed, like there's no opportunity for them, like there's no chance for them, when that is the mindset that they're raised with. And then even if someone has some hope, somebody or a number of people are very quick to squash it down.
Right.
What do you think, you're better? What do you think, you're going to get away from this? What do you think? So what happens is that perception of that community becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's why I believe that the one of the most important words, I'm a word person,
Yeah.
in all of this is accountability.
Yeah.
For the cops, they must be accountable to the training, to the recruitment, to the exercises, to, like you said, the education of the communities they're going into. Let's face it. And you gave such a good example when we spoke last week, or when recently we had a conversation, and you said, I grew up on my island. I didn't know from the diversity, so I wasn't aware of, all these things. And for me, I think that's a big part of it. We are a melting pot.
Yeah.
You're not policing in a town that's all this or all that. Once you are policing in an area where you are enforcing laws for a bunch of, cultures, traditions, customs, all these different faiths, races, whatever, men, women, old, young, rich, poor, those are a lot of considerations to have. And again, I know that we're saying, I feel like I don't know why the leadership would need our help. They're supposed to know these things. There should be very specific, drill down details,
Yeah.
like written documents, apps. I feel like so many things should be coming from this to foster a newer version of recruitment and treatment. But at the same time, I would love to see more effort in all communities. Doesn't have to be just communities of color. But if a community feels misunderstood, if a community feels unfairly perceived, part of it, and we spoke about the divorce concept, right?
Yes.
So part of it is when you're in this relationship and it seemed like it was going to be fine. You had confidence at one time. There's no reason this should go south. This should be okay. And now suddenly it's not.
Right.
And when that tension begins, when you realize you're not on the same page, that doesn't have to be marriage. That is any human relationship. So whether it's a work environment or a male-female thing, sometimes, God knows, female on female competition, There are so many different dynamics between people, and black-white happens to be our example today because this is a big one that happens to be on all our minds right now. But it could apply to many situations. When you feel that tension growing, when you feel that separation, that wall going up, instead of the wise, rational, productive response, which is to reach across and say, wait a minute, we were once on the same page. We both had high hopes for this. Even if it doesn't end up the way we hoped or planned, let's figure this out. For some reason, that is like always the last flipping choice. So what happens is people feel tense. Suddenly they don't feel like they're being received or perceived the way they want. So they become vulnerable. We all know what vulnerability does. Makes you afraid, makes you self-conscious. Self-esteem takes a dip. Now you're kind of a little angry, a little pissed off. This person made you doubt yourself. Why am I second guessing? Look what you did to me. You made me feel this way. So now, again, could be in marriage, could be men, woman, woman, work, home, friendship, does not matter. The dynamic of humanity is if you feel threatened, if you feel vulnerable, now this person who used to be the closest person, or at the very minimum, an equal peer,
or the one to protect you,
someone to respect,
yeah,
and just acknowledge as another being in your presence.
Right.
Now they're the enemy.
Right.
Now they're unknown. They're not trusted. They're an outsider, and the wall is up, and it's very, very hard to bring it down. And so what happens is, now what do we have? Now we have someone on this side of the wall, someone on this side of the wall. This person has a good point. They're kind of right. Mm-hmm. You're standing there with a uniform and a badge and a weapon, and you're telling me I've got to do whatever you tell me to do, even if it's put my face down in the dirt. That's kind of a problem for me. Mm-hmm. The cop has the same problem. I'm coming into your neighborhood. I left my family this morning hoping to get home to them at night. I come in, maybe me and a partner, because I'm supposedly trying to help split up whatever is going on here. And now I've got 50 people surrounding me, shaking my car, breaking my windows, screaming at me, get out, we don't want you, with every obscenity under the sun. Mm-hmm. So these are extreme examples, obviously. But when you get to that point, nobody's backing off of that. Right. You have to fix it before it gets there. Right. So now as a country, we're here again. After all these years, after all this progress, after all the talent, the musicians who have united us, the beautiful models, the Colin Powells, the Condoleezza Rice, the Barack Obama, freaking president. Nothing is better. It's worse than ever. So, I don't know the answer. I just keep thinking to myself, if humanity needs a guideline, and we're not all the same religion, and we're not all the same faith, and we're not all the same culture, and not all the same financial situation, and we all have our baggage, and we all have, what is the guideline? Mm-hmm. 10 commandments. 10 commandments. Respect your parents. Take care of your own. Don't steal. Don't kill. Don't cheat. You know what I mean? It's just be decent. Yeah. Just be decent.
Love your neighbor as yourself. Love your God. Treat each other with respect as all of God's children.
So basic. It should be so simple.
Should be so simple.
I get it that these things happen. I grew up in a home with a difficult marriage. My parents had a terrible marriage, and they deeply cared about each other. And they went on dates long after they were divorced and stayed out for 6 hours just talking until the restaurant closed, because they genuinely cared for and respected each other. But as married people, they did not work. And I grew up in that environment. I grew up seeing what happens when two decent people are coming from different sides, and they both feel threatened, they both feel insecure, they both feel vulnerable, and those claws come out. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you say things, you do things you can't take back, and you can't come back from that. So that's exactly what we're dealing with here. It's a different scale, it's a different issue, and I'm not trying to minimize the black-white. I completely understand that the racism is the crux of this issue. But to me, and maybe it's because I'm white, I own that. But to me, it's just humanity.
Mm-hmm.
And I gave you this example on the phone last week. I don't know if it's relevant enough, but one of the reasons it's always been a class thing for me is I grew up from a very early age taking the train into the city. And it's almost like what's the movie? A Time to Kill. Samuel L. Jackson. His daughter is brutally attacked, and he goes and kills the white guy who attacked his colored daughter, his black daughter. And of course, this black man is on trial for killing a white man like he's this heinous criminal. Mm-hmm. And his lawyer, Matthew McConaughey, has to make the case. So he describes the crime of what happened to the daughter, just talks about this little girl walking home, this horrific description of what happens. And then at the end of the whole thing, he says, and what if she was white? Mm-hmm. And the jury just is floored. So humanity, just, it's not, it's skin. Anyway.
I know. And, you know, at the end of the day, this is a heart matter. You know, we're dealing with sin and this heart issue. And I think, as what you said earlier, when people are not heard, you know, unresolved hurt and pain,
yes,
spirals into other ways to be heard. Mm-hmm. And what slavery has done to Blacks is a cry that has been echoing for 400 years. Mm-hmm. Of Black people saying, acknowledge what you did to our parents and our grandparents and our great grandparents, not when they arrived on the shore, but from when you went into our home and took them and shackled them and put them in ships like sardines, where they had to jump off. They rather have the sharks eat them than to endure all of that, where they have to poop on themselves and have to live in that for how many months to come over to build your America. Mm. This is the hard part of the conversation, where it's not 2020. We're saying the root of this came from a time where America is turning their backs on, and they don't want to hear that. They have to say something about this. They have to acknowledge, they have to say that yes, it happened, that we did wrong, just like we're dealing with the Native Indians who are fighting for the land that was stolen from them.
I don't feel like that's been made right at all.
That hasn't been made right. So we're looking at those deep, deep wrongs, those heinous crimes on humanity, and it's being filtered through the scenes of murders and the injustices with the Indians and all of that. These are just conduits of the deeper root of the problem. So someone might say, I don't care about the money. It's not just like in a divorce, you know, you said we talked about that. Mm-hmm. I know for me, it wasn't about the money or the property. It was for me to have dignity back. It was for somebody to acknowledge that I was a viable member of this union. Right. That as a woman, it didn't matter that I didn't work. I took care of the house and the kids. I did work. Mm-hmm. It was for someone, for a judge, for an attorney, for somebody to say, she has equal rights to receive a $5 bill and not to be told because you didn't work, you don't deserve it.
Right.
And that at the root of all of this is the way we were treated, the way we were stolen from our homes. As the Indian would say, the way I was driven from my land. Mm-hmm. And still today, I have to be living in sections that you're saying you gave to me. This was mine to begin with. Mm-hmm. And for us Blacks, we were told, and it's documented, that we're not human, that we are property. And we built or helped to build this America that is still telling us kick rocks. Until that is resounded back or said to us, what I hear you saying, and not even that, this is what we did to you. I think within the hearts of Blacks, everything else will sound like fluff, because the deep-seated hurt is it still being manifested in different ways and called different things. And I think this is why having allies on all sides is so important, because where my voice doesn't make a difference, my attorney's voice mattered. You know what I mean? The judge who spoke on behalf of my children, it mattered. So I wasn't alone. And like you said, we can't solve everything. We don't have all of the answers, but the people who can speak for us, who have the access for their voice to be heard, it's important that they speak on the issues where humanity matters. And the rest of the things, somehow we're going to have to pray our way through to figure it out, whether it's for policing or whatever the case may be. But at the very foundation, does my humanity matter to Beth? Do I matter to you?
I mean,
as a woman, do I matter?
As a person, as a woman, as a friend, as a sister, absolutely, 100%, 100%.
And it goes vice versa. And I think as we start doing that, then we see the 10 Commandments coming into fruition.
Yes.
But if I don't matter to you, if I am looked at as property or gain, it wouldn't matter.
It's such a foreign thought to me.
Yeah.
That it's I'm not naive. I get it.
Absolutely.
It's very present in too many places and right up to today. It's just unspeakable. And I think of the Holocaust, which was so much more recent, and that's unspeakable.
Right.
6 million people.
Yeah.
So I guess the perspective, for me especially, is I don't think that any apology makes up for it. I don't think any apology explains it. I don't think anyone around today can make it right, because those are not the people who did it. So for me I feel so completely disconnected from all of that. Like, I would have been with Harriet, like, watching one of the checkpoints. You know what I mean? I would have
talked about that so many times.
I don't know, frankly. I don't know. Like, would I have had the courage? Would I have had the guts? I would like to think that I would have. I just like with Anne Frank. I mean, I've thought so many times, would I have hid? Would I have hidden a Jewish person in Nazi Germany? Would I have taken someone in? Here's the thing. And again, this is not to minimize what one group went through or what another group went through. There have been crimes within and among humanity since the beginning of time. There's greed, there's corruption, there's persecution. What happened to the blacks coming to America is by far one of the worst. I would say the blacks in slavery in America and the Holocaust were two of the worst. But there have certainly been genocides in other places and many other things that were as bad, if not worse, that I'm not even aware of, because I try not to focus on those things. I do think that if I can't really speak to it because it's not my baggage.
Right.
So it's very difficult. And I no matter what I say, I wouldn't want it to sound flippant, because I'm not meaning just get over it, because that's not what I mean. But at the same time, even though there's a lot of work that has to be done to make the past right, I still come back to accountability. It is 2020. If somebody chooses to make a good life for themselves, even if they start from nothing, it is possible. And it's also possible to not make those efforts and feel that it's everyone else's fault. It's because of this, it's because of that, it's because of this, it's because of that. And the truth is, in every group of people, black, white, or otherwise, I see people who do not rise. I see people who say my father was a drunk, or my father was never around, or my mother wasn't nice enough, or they saved all the money for my brother's education, I got nothing, whatever. We're either people of excuses and blame, or we're people who say, yes, this happened to me, this happened to my family, this happened to my people, and still I rise.
Mm-hmm.
And still I rise. And the people that I look to as my heroes were the people who went through some of the worst directly themselves personally, and it did not stop them or hold them back. So it's very difficult when people are indirectly, maybe from generations, and I'm not saying the hurt isn't there, and I'm not saying it isn't very
because
real.
I think even with that, we still have to acknowledge that, and again, coming from the Caribbean, I fit within that category, but
Yeah.
we still have to acknowledge the fact that there are people who are around who will be like crabs and pull individuals back. I
Yes.
have a Black son who will not be accepted in some circles no matter how much he tries to rise. And that's our reality as Black. And so that I
Very
think it
painful.
still has to be, it has to be balanced, because I think someone hearing that who has not done anything wrong, who's whatever, but keeps getting the no because of the color of their skin
Mm.
or the perception of them, will say to you,
And that has to change. It has to change.
there are the exceptions to
For
that.
everyone who's mistreated. I mean, think about it. I know that my mother, both of my parents were very overweight. So it's also a visual. You're not hiding it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something that you're blamed for. That's not something you're born with. It's something you supposedly can control, something you can help. It's a weakness. People spot you, you walk into a store, you're the fat, sloppy, lazy person.
Mm-hmm.
So that was something I was always, as a child, very self-conscious about, that my parents were older, that they were very heavy. I don't mean a little bit, I mean a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it's something you can't hide. You can't, people treat you like less. They treat you like, it's not the same. It's not the same. Fat people have not been enslaved. So I'm not making an apple to
I know what
apple
you're saying.
comparison.
Yeah. You're talking
But
about the visibility of things that it's there.
I'm going back to accountability.
Yeah.
I'm going back to life is not fair.
Mm-hmm.
And we all have hurdles. Some of us from the past holding us back. Some of us from people right now holding us back. Even look at Marlena's story in Real Women's Stories. You know, how hard she works, 2 jobs, going to school, and we know her mother loves her dearly. Not always the most encouraging, you know, and not even out of a bad place. Sometimes it's protective. What was the movie with J-Lo with she's the housekeeper in the hotel.
Oh,
And she
my
applied for the
favorite
management
movie,
program.
Made in Manhattan.
Made in Manhattan.
Yes,
And the mother,
yes,
not because the mother doesn't love her,
right,
the mother isn't trying to hold her down. The mother doesn't want her to be disappointed.
right.
So she says, don't shoot for something that you'll never get. We belong here.
Mm-hmm.
But again, she's a different generation.
Mm-hmm.
She says, don't tell me where I belong. I'm going to do this. And we have to hope. We have to hope that with each generation, we give the kids the strength.
Right.
We give them the backbone. We give them the self-esteem. That's why the Leadership Academy is so close to my heart.
Yeah.
Because we have rich white people who suffer from low self-esteem, who cannot lead, who cannot ask for a raise, who are afraid to show up to work, who have anxiety every day of their lives. And they don't even have all of this to deal with, of being a person of color and the oppression and the racism and the looks and the discomfort. And so when you add layer upon layer upon layer of it being a chore to interact, to go about your daily life, it takes pretty incredible strength, inner strength and strength around you to shine in that type of environment. And I don't know why, but that first day that I met Norca at that International Women's Day, she was shining. And I thought, I want some of that light.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is why we are so close and connected. And she referred
Why?
me.
Because I'm a sappy fool.
No, I cried too. Uh,
Oh,
Beth is talking about For Real Women International and Malka Blackman Richards, who's the founder, who has this incredible organization that we're a part of that seek to just pour into and give women the permission to use the power that they were born with, and if it takes rebuilding them, that's what we do through programs such as the Academy and LEAD and all of the international work that For Real Women does. And this is what Beth is talking about. So even within the class that we're talking about, we have our issues as women, where we're 100 years behind. Slaves
and
are
even with that, we've made
black,
so much progress.
right?
Again, I like to be grateful for all the tremendous progress that's been made, but it doesn't mean there isn't work yet to do.
Doesn't mean it, right? Exactly.
And one of the things that I love about LEAD, which is what we were talking about, that's why I kind of thought of it and brought it up, is that the first day when everyone shows up, nobody's quite sure what to expect. And the very first day is whatever you've been through, whatever trauma you have suffered and survived, whatever baggage has brought you to where you are today, we acknowledge it, we see you, we hear you, and now leave it at the door. And the reason I believe that program is so transformative is because of exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah.
To make a conscious decision that you are going to be accountable for your own life, your own choices, your own decisions from this moment forward, that doesn't mean that you're denying or erasing. You can't erase the past.
Right.
I don't care how much you try. Right. And you can't, even if it's unpleasant, that may be more reason to remember it. We don't want anyone to forget. We already have people saying the Holocaust never happened. If we erase all the signs of what happened, nobody learns from it. But if we each individually decide that whatever brought us to here, we are starting from here forward, and then we learn to lead because we have the tools to succeed, and we bring others with us. We create, I told my niece, my gorgeous, smart, amazing 17-year-old niece, who I always try to empower, build a bubble. It's no limit to that bubble. Fill it with everything you want and nothing you don't. And the bubble can be flexible, but you need to have some kind of protection around yourself so that these toxic parts of the world don't get in. And they will seep in, and we'll be aware of them, and we'll come into contact with them. But if we have this virtual bubble of this, our own personal universe, with people that we love and respect and admire, and projects that are creative outlets, and things that challenge our minds, and exercise, and the outdoors, and nature, and all these things that we want to, life can be so full and so rich. I look at these people who just thrive on anger and frustration, and I know that the sources are real. I know that. But right now, starting today, how are we going to use the time we have? Because what if our time is over? Could be any moment.
Yeah. And this is the beauty of the difficult conversation. I think this is a beautiful place for us to pause within this conversation, because of course I'm going to invite you back a gazillion times. But
you have to see what the feedback is. They're going to say, "Where'd you find that crazy person?"
Oh, no way. We talked when we first had the conversation about this, that difficult conversations are needed. But this was a safe space because we love each other, we trust each other, and we have relationships. And that is our foundation. I could never just call you because I see a post on Facebook and ask you to do something like that. But we have a history of trust.
Very much.
We have a history of conversations. We have a history of tears. We have a history of hugs, and we have a history of hearing each other's stories and validating each other's stories.
Yes.
And that is the foundation that we did say we're not going to agree on everything.
Mm-hmm.
We're not, because we're coming from different perspectives.
Absolutely.
We're coming from different experiences. We have so many things that are different about us that would cause division, that would say we shouldn't be friends, that would say that we should not like each other. But somehow we have found a common ground, and I believe it's because of our stories of triumph and our stories of loving people. And we've been empathetic because somehow you pull from your experiences to relate to me, and I've done the same to relate to you. If we can dream of a better world, of a world that can do that, if everybody is accountable to each other to say, I will put myself in her shoes to see where she's coming from, and not just say sorry or be sympathetic, but to have compassion and empathy, and then say, come on, Beth, you're my sister. I think we said that. You're my sister. It's no more Beth. It's no more the lady from over here. You didn't say, oh, she's Latoya from over there. You didn't say that about Norca. What we said was sisters.
Yes.
And that means something. And if we say we're family, then that means that family can have hard conversations. Families will disagree. Families will argue. Families will fight. But you're my family.
And I can have these conversations with you better than some of my blood family. Oh. It really does. It does depend on the person and how safe you feel, and that level of trust. And there's I keep referring to media. I don't know why, but Sting.
I know you brought all of Hollywood to this show.
Oh, no, sorry.
Okay, that's fine.
I'm in books, so it's the world that I'm in all the time, and I love music. But Sting had that song years ago. I hope the Russians love their children too. And it was when things were very, very tense and nuclear. Everybody was in a panic, and I was still a teenager. I wasn't really even paying it so much mind at the time, but I remember that song. And it was when you have to get down to the barest basics. What is the common ground? What is the common ground of humanity? We love our children. We want to be safe. We want opportunity. So I do recognize and acknowledge and even welcome and embrace the differences. I don't have a problem with differences. I don't believe that we have to be the same to be equal. I have a real issue with that.
I agree.
I want to see the recipes. I want to see the pictures of the home and all the different places. I want to see the hairstyles. I want to see the fashion. I want to see all of it. But at the same time, I do truly, this is from the center of my heart, the customs, the traditions, the themes, those can change. I believe that we are so much more the same than different. We want to feel safe.
Exactly.
We want to feel appreciated and respected and heard. Like you said, we want to feel heard. If someone makes you feel seen and heard and acknowledges you, even if they say, I think you are dead wrong, but I get where you're coming from.
Right.
That's it. Conversation over.
Conversation over. Exactly.
And my husband told me early on, Joe and I were a little crazy, but he told me early on, he said, you're my wife. No matter how wrong you are, I'm still going to be standing right next to you. And I might tell you, you were really wrong today, but it doesn't mean I'm not going to have your back.
Right.
So we just need to have each other's backs. Life is hard enough. We have to fight against illness and viruses and, got natural resources and the environment. We have so many things to worry about. We shouldn't be worrying about each other. Anyway, thank you so much for having me. I hope something will be useful.
Of course. Absolutely. I think this was one of my favorite conversations. I know that those who would be viewing will feel your heart, and hopefully they'll see the love we have for each other. They better. And just know that those who love will do the difficult thing for reconciliation.
Yes. For the people who can't, for the people who still don't feel heard or need to be heard, we have to share those stories. We have to be the ones to open those dialogues. If we're the strong ones, if we're the ones who have the backbone and the self-esteem to be out in front, and that's why Teresa's video made me feel that I should say something.
So we should probably thank Teresa right now.
Thanks, I think girl. I sent her a note. I think I sent her a note the day that I did it, and I said this just changed. This just made me.
Well, I'll put the link for it. And Teresa, of course, is one of the board members now for Real Women International, and a very powerful woman in her own right.
Yes.
Beth, I love you. Like, I love mangoes and palm trees and the beach and the sand. And you know how much I love my mangoes.
That's pretty intense. That's intense love. That's right intense.
There. Thank you so much. Thank you for your vulnerability. I affirm your tears, and I appreciate. I know this was difficult because you're such an introvert and you don't like all of this, but I know it's because you care. And I want you to know that I don't take it lightly.
I wouldn't have done it for just anyone, but I do really trust you.
I know.
And if one person hears it and it changes a mind or opens a mind or helps someone feel a little bit recognized by someone from another side, then this was a very worthwhile hour.
So, hugs.
Hugs.
Take care.
Thank you.
We can't see it.
Zombie Walking Dead.
You're good. Okay. And pronounce the last name is Werner, right? Or Werner?
Werner. The nerdy kind. Yeah.
Werner. Okay.
With an E. Werner.
Okay.
But it's fine. You can't say it wrong. It's all good.
No problem. All right. So we'll start now. Thank you for joining us on another episode of Life Talks. I hope that you were inspired and that you have felt a rejuvenation in your life. And I hope that what you are saying right now is that the answer that you are given to what life has thrown at you is that I am still here. Email us with your Life Talk ideas at mylifetalkstv@gmail.com. See you next time.